Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 12 of our weekly Q&A videos. As we sometimes mention, but not always, if you are on YouTube right now and you're watching this as a YouTube video, that's the main way that most people watch this. You can actually watch this in a whole other way. And this exciting opportunity is brought to you by a variety of links in the description, where you can check us out on your podcast app of choice, as long as it's one of the links in the description. And if it's not, then I guess you can check it out on one of those anyways. And a few people do it that way, and they seem to enjoy it because the potential advantage is that you can download it and take us on the go. You can play it in the background while the game is open on one device.
So where's the punchline? It feels
very
like
feature rich. It
the
feels
way
like you're building up to something.
You're building up to something, and there's some sponsor or something, and then it's not.
We make no money from it. We make less money from it than if you watch this YouTube video.
And we make very little there anyway, so it's not like it makes a material difference.
That's true.
But maybe it's just that the chance of spreading joy, if there's any chance of joy to be had.
Also, I really like podcasts as a format. I can really get behind them. It's my preferred method of long form content. Stuff that's about as long as our videos are, and like a once a week type of thing. I would much rather listen to us on a podcast than I would as a YouTube video in the background.
I'd much rather just listen to us right here as we're recording it.
That's true. I wouldn't listen to us as a podcast because I can kind of get that banter, just in my day to day. I don't really need to go anywhere else for it. But if you, the listener at home, are not listening to this in podcast format, maybe try it out, or not even listen to us. There are better podcasts to listen to than us too. But listen to podcasts, I guess. This is my plug for podcasts as a medium.
That's cool.
There we go.
So maybe we'll start off this week. We don't actually have a lot of questions, and I think this is a good excuse to fix this particular episode in time, because right now what we're, in Canada at least, we're sort of stuck in the middle of the second wave of our pandemic. Mm-hmm. It's in a lot of measures, it's worse than the first wave. But there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel, as there was an announcement that we're going to get our first sort of lot delivery of vaccines from Pfizer. So that's the one that needs like super sub-zero temperatures, like minus 70 or minus 80 or something.
How cold does it need to be when it goes into your arm?
Oh, it doesn't need to be cold. It's just that for it to be stable, right? It's like a lot of things. So insulin, for example, it should be stored in the fridge, but it's pretty stable for like, I don't know, a month. Outside, so you can still carry around and do stuff, but it's just that you want to keep it as long as possible before you actually have to start. In my mind, I feel like you're spending its
life cycle
before
it starts degrading.
So my fear is that so that's going to be the first one available. The other two, I believe, the one from Moderna, and there's another one now. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I just remember it was the one where they screwed up the dosing, and it turns out that the screw-up dosing was more effective. But anyways, the other two are more stable at room temperature. Mm-hmm. So that's actually really good. And they'd only need to be refrigerated in transport or maybe frozen in transport at sort of normal freezer temperatures. It doesn't have to be any sort of special freeze. And the reason why I think that's important is because, I mean, you can look at it two ways. Either that they need special equipment that's different, it's new enough that people are going to be careful and they're going to do it, or you can look at it as, well, there's already enough issues with cold chain transportation that when you put more fancy demand, there's a word I'm looking
like higher demands,
something that's more stringent kind of demands, more elaborate, more something that's more unusual demands, that maybe there's a danger, instead of people being more careful because it is unusual, that there's more danger that they're going to screw it up, and that you'll be happy about getting a vaccine that happens to have been compromised because it wasn't transported at the correct temperature.
Yeah. And what's weird about it is Canada, right, we don't really have access yet. There is some sort of limited access to vaccines in the US. And I was talking to somebody who said that they went to high school with a bunch of very wealthy people whose like parents were like literally members of the 1%. And so they already know like a decent number of people who have the vaccine and who have gotten the vaccine in the US.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what their access to that was or how they got there, but it's, I don't know, it seems kind of messed up.
It is. I mean, I think that's one thing with the whole American healthcare system, right? Where it's the fundamental sort of messed up part is that it's not treated as a human right.
Yeah.
That you can distort the delivery of it by just throwing money at it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, listen, I know we don't have it perfect in Canada, right?
Yeah.
But there's something that...
There's a sliding scale of, bad to terrible.
Yeah, and it's not some of the criticisms I hear from the U.S. about Canadian healthcare is, waiting lists and stuff. But in terms of prioritizing, I think Canada does a decent job of making sure that the urgent stuff gets taken care of. And it's only the elective things like a knee replacement, which for people who are suffering from it and can't walk, that probably doesn't feel that elective, right? Mm-hmm. It probably disrupts their life and their quality of life goes right down in the dumps, but it's not going to kill them the same way.
And also, when you talk about that, right, if there's a long waiting list, is that because everybody who needs healthcare is getting it? Then that means you need more doctors, right? The sort of implication that if everything worked exactly the same in America, and everything else was the same as it was now, there'd be a huge waiting list. It would be that there's a bunch of people who are being seen by doctors who otherwise aren't able to be seen by doctors, right? And I think that doesn't necessarily speak to an issue with the system as much as an issue with supply of medical care. Or
maybe it's the supply is good, but you're applying it the wrong place. So think about it like this. So when you've got insurance companies, so instead of having single payer healthcare, where the single payer is responsible for all of healthcare, when you've got the insurance company supplying it and they're only paying for the care of the people that they've insured for the time that they are insured.
Yeah.
What it does is it skews the value of certain things. So for example, preventive care, if it's not nearly as efficient if you're only going to be paying for it when it happens and you're not going to be responsible for it when they can no longer afford healthcare and you have to pay the consequences. So as an example, screening for colon cancer.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's done routinely. It kicks in when you're 50 and we have a whole system in place to make sure that people, get reminders and whatever. Mm-hmm. In the States, there's a real... what's the word? The motivation, that kind of thing where the motivation isn't to pay for preventive care because what the insurance company is hoping for is that by the time you actually get colon cancer, you're not going to be insured by them anymore, right? So they don't save a lot. You actually lose money because where you could have spent a bit of money on preventative care, then you don't have the catastrophic kind of colon cancer that requires chemo, maybe surgery, maybe radiation.
Yeah.
So maybe the States has the resources, but they're spending their per capita spending
is higher
than anybody by a huge margin, and their outcomes are worse. Yeah. I mean, I guess if we only look at sort of developed countries, and we don't include places that don't have a well-developed healthcare system. Mm-hmm. So I think that skews everything about the United States. And so, even in, say, when you've got lawsuits because somebody gets injured or hurt, then the awards are huge because they have to take into account the cost of healthcare. Mm-hmm. That's not covered the same way as it is in single-payer countries like Canada or Australia or New Zealand.
Yeah, and there's just different concerns. I think, the best type of people to ask are people who have both lived here and in the U.S. And I had a friend actually recently who had to have a heart procedure done.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she is studying here, has family here. I think one half of her family is from here.
Okay.
And the other half is from the U.S. And as part of the process of everything shutting down right before sort of borders closed, right at sort of that the end of last year's school year.
Right.
She packed all of her stuff up and went to the U.S. and then started having heart trouble. And she almost wanted to ship herself back. It was possible to come back to Canada.
What's her status? Did she have coverage in Canada?
Yeah, she does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, no, it was literally just, she started having heart problems and they weren't sure and they were having to do a bunch of tests and then going to, like surgeries and stuff, and some of her family works in healthcare, so I think they have probably pretty good insurance. I don't know. I didn't ask about that situation because that's not really my place to be like, how is that financially for you guys? But she was like, yeah, no, we were gonna like the cost of ambulance rides and everything else. Or like I almost wanted to just come back to Canada, even if that meant that I would be like separated from like a lot of my support and like my like direct family for like taking care of me, because I just didn't want to be like a financial burden. I think that sucks.
Yeah. Well, again, when you make decisions like that, and the cost of something has a huge impact on what you decide to do and what you decide not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of money, I'm because of a lot of different reasons, I'm slowly working my way through this book called The Deficit Myth. I mentioned it a few times before. It's by Stephanie Kelton. It's about modern monetary theory.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you talk about medical debt, like we were just now, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing that whenever the Canadian or American government that I see, when I see them talking about debt and deficit, the analogy that's always used is comparing it to a household, where going to debt is bad, you owe money, it's costing you more, and it's costing you because there's interest that you're paying on it. And so it limits your ability to spend later. But what's interesting, there's some really interesting premises in that when you've got countries that have their own fiat money where they can issue it themselves,
which is just like the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, most major currencies,
right?
When there's nothing backing it. If there's a currency that you can give to like your treasury or something, and they'll give you a bit of gold or silver, if there's some sort of like real world value, if there's like stocks,
right,
anything,
then there's a limit.
Yeah. Then that's what you call, I forget what the term is, but that's non-fiat currency. And fiat currency is when, I can't redeem 20 Canadian dollars for anything from the government. There's nobody saying that $20 has to be worth at least this much, and the government knows because I'll give it to you.
So one of the early interesting ideas that she talks about is how what it amounts to is each of the countries issuing something that they require you to have to pay them back, and that's the taxes. So that if you look at the net kind of money, there's money that the government issues, the money the government takes, which is taxes, and the difference is what you're left with. So when the government has deficit, what it means is the people that they're issuing money to have a surplus.
Yeah.
And they get to spend it. And the fundamental difference is between money issuers and money users, where the problem in sort of thinking about it is because there's a lot of governments that aren't issuers. Municipal governments, provincial, or I guess in the States, state governments, and a lot of countries aren't issuers. Like all of the European Union, they don't have control. Each of those countries don't have control. That's why the case that Stephanie Kelton is making, that's why Greece had so much trouble when they actually literally ran out of money. States can't, Canada can't. So, the traditional boogeyman of the deficit makes a lot of sense when you're a household and a money user, because at some point, the bank's going to come a-calling. The people you owe money to are going to come, or maybe not banks, whoever's going to come and break your knees if you don't pay them back.
Yeah, there's somebody sort of one step above you in the financial hierarchy.
Right. And one of the premises that Stephanie Kelton has that when she writes it in black and white, it seems really obvious, is you're a money issuer, you just make more if you owe money. And it's a really cool point that she hammers home a lot, because when you say it, it seems just so obviously true. They can just make more money. So the real boogeyman is inflation, because when you make too much money, it chases limited products or resources or whatever goods you have.
Yeah.
Then everybody has more, it's going to drive up the price. That's the problem. But depending on what capacity your economy has, there's actually more room to put money into it until you really reduce involuntary unemployment. So people who really want to work but don't is driven down to zero. And there used to be, like, part of the problem with the way people thought about money, because that didn't change until the 70s, where it became no longer backed by gold, at least in the States. So, it's really interesting. The concepts are interesting, and it really sort of shines a light on how we've got a lot of assumptions. What I would have liked more, and maybe she'll get to it at the end, the historical basis, because that switch is really, I think, why there's discrepancy between how people think about money, which was probably true in the 60s and 70s when it was tied to gold.
Yeah.
And how people think about it now. And so the ideas that we've got left over aren't necessarily so much myths as they are vestiges of what was true and what we believed, but happens to be wrong because the situation is different.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like, I really recommend it. It's very interesting. It's thoughtful. And yeah, I'm not usually big on reading nonfiction, but I'm usually not big on reading it when it comes out. But it's actually, I don't know.
Both of these things.
Yeah. So that's that for this week. You want to get into questions?
Yeah, there we go. Our first question comes from Satan, and they say...
Satan?
Yeah.
Satan.
Satan. And
Or
they
Satan,
say,
right.
it's say and then the number 10. And they say, I heard in one of your Q&A sessions where one of you desired that Prime Darkseid should always been a bronze character. I figured that if you promote him just enough so that his stats match 3x that of an Elite 10 level 60 bronze character, now he's in the same league. I suppose this is the closest we can come to your wish coming true. As always, great to see you guys doing what you're doing. So there we go. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the way that you do it so that it's balanced in terms of stats.
Yeah.
And the reason why we want him to be a bronze character, and the reason why there's no real good fix for that, is kind of less obvious because we don't really want to take bronze characters in online multiplayer, right?
Right.
So, in online multiplayer, it wouldn't be useful for a couple of reasons. It wouldn't be useful because bronze characters have worse passives, and their stats, because its health and damage, would be calculated, and so you wouldn't get any competitive advantage for bringing him into multiplayer.
Right. Yeah, so one thing to point out too is your gears don't work as well. So if you're looking at your bronze characters based on the boosted stats of Darkseid, and the gears boost the stats of the original, the base stat, not the boosted stat, then each gear gives you much less benefit. So then if you're really pushing the limits of Elite 10 level 60 bronze, you're going to be a disadvantage still for what you're facing.
Yeah, so just having it leveled out stats, because we're not taking an online multiplayer, it doesn't matter if their stats are the same.
Right.
What we want to use him for, and why it would be good if he was bronze, is for like challenges, right? Where you have a bronze character only challenge requirement.
Yeah.
Or it's for grinding, where you take him into single player and maybe you get a chance to, at the same time that you're leveling up your new characters, you get to maybe try them out because they've got better stats. You can take them into a higher league, and it would let you have like an all gold an all bronze grinding team. Yeah. And it would let you use a lot more teams as grinding teams, even if you only had bronze characters and then, your Darkseid. All you'd have to do is give energy recharge and you'd have a more balanced team. Yeah. Now, Darkseid already works decently as a gold with his higher stats as potentially somebody who you use for grinding anyways. But, so really the reason why we would want Darkseid to be bronze, the most important reason, is for challenge requirements. Yeah. And no matter what you do to his stats, the places that we're putting him in with other bronze characters don't actually match his stats, so it doesn't actually matter. So the main problem is that we can't do anything to make him a bronze class of character, which is sometimes valuable. Right. And we don't get any benefit by keeping his stats low.
Yeah. So I mean, there's task in Phantom Zone where it's no golds, you get a bonus for it. Yeah. That's a good example. But here's the other thing too. Historically, that might not be so obvious now, but was obvious if you've been playing when he was first released. Darkseid was so Injustice 2. The only thing that was good that came out of Injustice 2 was how they codified the idea of a threat level. Yeah. So they looked at a team and said, put a number to the balance of their passive, their attack, their damage, and came up with this number that was threat level. So you could make a comparison between different teams and see, even if you didn't see how they calculated the threat level, you could see how that number was a way to match up teams. Yeah. So, however they did it in Injustice 1, when they first introduced multiplayer, there was a way to change the composition of your team to increase the number of defensive fights. And at that point, the maxed out, I think it had to have been level 50 Elite 7 by then, right? Because that was when they introduced multiplayer. It was 40 and 5 before. So the best team for drawing fights was Darkseid plus Shazam, and I can't remember who the third character was, but if you did that...
Wasn't it a Batman?
It might have been, but you could get like thousands.
Yeah. I think it might have been Arkham Origins Batman.
It sounds like... I feel like it's not true. It can't be, because that would have been a good guy to have your defensive team. The funny thing was, this team that would draw a lot of fights would win a very small percentage of them. But it would be enough so that, let's say you got like 1,500 fights. If you won less than 10%, you'd still be getting like 100. I remember seasons where we get more than 100 defensive wins.
Yeah.
And we barely get 100 defensive fights each season now.
Yeah, which is still pretty good.
It is. But that was one of the reasons why when you had Darkseid, he was a potential magnet. And back then, when the race was to get gears and max them out and generate the kind of resources that, like have the rewards in multiplayer seasons and make the shards. And I mean, it doesn't matter the same way now, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we're so far along in the game, so it's more for messing around and maybe getting the top rewards instead of actually grinding for the sake of, spending every waking hour trying to get more. Mm-hmm. You would have had to give up all your a lot of defensive wins if you wanted to use him match stats with your bronze characters, which you don't really want to do anyways.
Yeah.
So the bigger point is, I mean, there are so many characters that are close to being great if they just make like a minor tweak to them, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because there's this element of power creep, and it's a combination of things. It's not just stats. There's some real power creep in terms of the passives being 2 or 3 things where any one of them would have been good enough by themselves to make a really good gold character.
Yeah, and just power creep and passives in general. I mean, like, remember when Raven came out? They always wanted the new character to be worthy of some effort and building some, excitement, which makes sense because you want the new stuff to come in to make you more excited. You don't want the new stuff to come in to be crappier than what you've already got. But what that meant is that basically every time new stuff was introduced, pretty much since the game first came out, it was almost all gold characters, right? More than almost anything else, because bronze and silver were sort of meant to be seen as more of like stepping stones to the real big players. And they were always a little bit beefier and a little bit harder hitting. And, we saw that when they came out with metal characters where they wanted to make them just, that little bit of an edge. And everything was meant to just have that little bit of an edge on what came before it.
And I think that was a huge mistake. I can see it in a game like Mortal Kombat, for example. But in a straight DC Universe Injustice game, you've got players who have an affinity for certain characters that have nothing to do with the game.
Yeah.
These are characters in a whole universe full of stories, and we've got an attachment to them. If they had just come out with new skins of characters, or new characters even, right? Like, there's tons of DC characters that haven't shown up. Like, we could have any of the Vertigo stuff. So Sandman, Constantine, actually Zatanna's in there. So she's in that universe of magic, right?
Yeah.
Or the Demon. You could have had, like, people would have wanted them, even if they've been crappy characters.
Yeah.
So they could have extended the lifespan of this without having to do that power creep to draw people to finish challenges. People just love these characters and want them anyways.
Yeah. I mean, some interesting stuff that games have done, which, Injustice basically does. Games will do stuff where characters are very close to the same amount of power, and when it's like cards or like a collection game, the way that you power them up is by getting multiple copies of them, right?
Okay.
And so, they could have just done that here, where everybody starts off at the same power. You get everybody who's bad, and instead of being like bronze, silver, gold in an elite level, you just have the more copies you bring into them, they can actually sort of rank up.
Isn't that what's happening with elite? Like, how's that different from promoting them?
It would be more like something like everybody would start at approximately the same power level.
Yeah.
And then if you got like the first 10 copies of them, you'd be able to promote them to like a silver card. And then after the next 10 copies, they'd be able to be promoted to a gold card, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Potentially, right? And that would have been, you could still have people from new universes, new passives, and you could still have, your sort of tiered cards, but it's just making some people sort of stop at a certain point. And then, your people with better passives are the people who you're going to search for, the people that you're going to buy more in packs, whatever that could. There's a lot of different things they could have done with it.
Yeah.
And,
because if they saved the power creep, like this power creep for later, think how much longer the lifespan of this game could have been.
Another thing that they could do, which is already what they do, if they just made them more clearly balanced based off of the proportion of each of their stats, right? Mm-hmm. So if each character could be totally unique on the basis of just off the top of my head, right? Like attack speed, very clearly, right? Number of hits on the combo ender. You talk about like number of hits in a swipe versus number of hits in a tap, right? You talk about attack versus health and sort of how that's built up. And, you could even really easily bring in something else like percent damage blocked, right?
Right.
So some characters would be tankier not just for having more health, because, it would be based off of a proportion. You'd just be sort of, having some mix of high to low for each of those sort of stat categories. Right. But somebody could be a tank because they have a high proportion of health, a high proportion of their sort of stats are dumped into health. And then, they block more damage.
Right.
And you could have a huge amount of variation. We already have little bits of that, but stuff like attack speed, and tap combo and swipe combo, like number of hits are all sort of implied, but not explicit. And with just a tiny bit more work, there still would have been a huge amount of potential variation between people, and between characters, while having everybody be sort of closer to a level playing field where you could play with whatever character or whatever skin you wanted, as long as you didn't hate the way that they played.
Right. No, I think, couldn't have said that better myself.
I mean, that's already what people do for fighting games, right? That's already how fighting games work.
Yeah.
For, the vast majority of fighting games where people have different, attacks. And the one thing that you lose in this type of game is the sort of really different move suite, right? You lose the different combos, the different patterns. So you can't really do that the same way with this type of mobile game, and just with mobile games in general, because it's harder to do sort of those combos and those really more sophisticated input stuff.
They tried that with Injustice 2. I don't think they were successful though.
Yeah, it's so hard. There's I think one of the best combo systems that I've ever played in a mobile game is the I believe it's called the Shadow Fight series. Where there's like punches and kicks, and you can actually do like a variety of things with the joystick, like you can do jumping kicks and like sweeping kicks and a bunch of other stuff.
Street Fighter.
But it's hard, and it's hard to do combos. And when your controls are so limited, it can be really frustrating. There's a game that I adore. Yeah. I love the game Dead Cells so much.
Yeah.
It's a roguelite, which means that you're playing through the same sort of set of areas over and over again. But the light part comes in because you can get upgrades.
Right.
So you're getting stronger over each run. And so I have it on both my phone and on Steam. And I've had it on Steam for a long time. I played it for probably close to 100 hours at this point. And it's great. It's really responsive. It's a lot of fun. I beat it on the highest difficulty. I think there's new bosses now. Because it was not like a fully finished game. And I play it on mobile, and I'm happy to support them. I'm more than happy to buy it again. But it's not a great game on mobile. It's the exact same game. There's nothing about it. There's no feature that's missing. There's a lot of different controls that all have to fit on a really cramped screen. And there's a lot of sort of value to being precise and measured and careful with how you play. And on mobile, there is a lot of challenge getting anything close to a smooth sort of sense of gameplay. And so I really struggle getting anywhere near the same amount of enjoyment. And normally being able to play something on the go adds a lot of value.
Right.
Versus being sort of locked to a computer. But I find myself still playing more Dead Cells on my computer than I do on mobile, just because it's so much harder to, get the same mileage out of a mobile control scheme.
Right. Something you said about I must have told you this story before. When I was younger and I used to play the Street Fighter 2 stand-ups.
Yeah.
and I didn't have much money. So whenever I played, I sucked against the computer. Yeah. So I'd always try to play against people, because then we used to have this, I must have told you this, we had this, there's always this gentleman's kind of agreement that whoever won the first one, out of 3 would let the other person win the second one, and then you decide on the third. So then that way I'd know for sure I'd get like a full 3 fights.
Yeah, so you'd be able to play the second fight, but then before it ended, you'd let the other person take it.
Right, because then you get more practice, because I sucked. So I would always be playing second player, because I'd always be joining in.
Yeah.
So, all right, Ken and Ryu, they have 3 things that they do. They have the Hurricane Kick, which was, I never found that useful. They had the Fireball.
Yeah. The
Hadouken, and then they had the Hurricane Punch. Or the Tornado Punch, what's it called?
Shoryuken.
What is that?
I don't know.
Okay. So I could do the fireball from either side.
Yeah.
I could only do the what's it called again? The punch.
The Shoryuken.
Shoryuken consistently from the player 2 side. so if I'm on the wrong side, I totally suck. Yeah. So there's a fight we played. I think, I can't even remember what happened in the first 2 fights. It was only the third fight that mattered. But the key was that the other guy was really surprised when I had him backed in the corner. And there's 3 punch it buttons and 3 kick buttons for anybody who hasn't played Street Fighter 2 in the arcade.
Yeah.
And they're from light but fast, medium, and then hard but slower on each of them. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I got him in the corner, and I just kept on doing the Shoryuken on the light punch over and over again. And there was so little time in between one and the next that I had him trapped in the corner. So he could keep on blocking and take a little bit of damage every single time.
Yeah.
But every time he'd try to time it so that he would get in between them, I was that fast, I was that good on one side, but I couldn't do it on the other side. And if he just gotten the other way, he would have been able to finish.
So you ended up winning by whittling him down and not letting him do anything.
I didn't even have to whittle him down. He couldn't do anything because I was just so fast. So every time he tried to get out, then I would not be whittling him down. I'd be doing a bunch of damage from a full unblocked hit. So that was how I made my quarter stretch. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's always been Super Smash Brothers that has been sort of that, like, amongst my friends.
It's a different world, though, when you don't have to pay for each fight. Like, it's already a sunk cost. You've already paid for it.
When Super Smash Brothers, I think it was 4, maybe, whatever the Wii U one was, it might have literally just been called, like, Smash for the Wii U or something. But that was the one that we played for a while, because there's the Wii one, right? And then there was the Wii U one and then the Switch one. And so we played that for a very long time. And the only problem was amongst my friend group, like, nobody bought a Wii U. We had exactly one person who had a Wii U. So we would only ever get to play it when we were over at their house. And that was sort of that, like, it did feel a little more premium. Because
scarcity premium.
Yeah, because with, the new one's a good game. I haven't played it nearly as much as I played the Wii U version, just because it hasn't been out as long. And, with everybody going off to university, a lot of the people that I would play Smash with, I don't anymore. Because it's, it's hard to meet up with the same sort of regularity.
Right.
And I refuse to pay for Nintendo Switch Online, because I think it is too much to pay for a pretty bad online service. And I would not make enough use of it. But yeah, that's playing for the Wii U. It's obviously not the same, right? Because there wasn't really any cost to me for playing it.
Right.
But I imagine it was a little bit of that same where you really want to make your time with it. You really want to stretch out that value, because I know the second I go home, there's no Wii U waiting for me there. Whereas with the Wii, I feel like almost everybody had a Wii. And so you'd play it if somebody came over to my house randomly, you'd play it with whoever. Right. And so just in between those sessions that you're playing with your friends, different people have time to play more or less. And so there's sort of that shifting skill level where, like, somebody will come back and they'll already know a new character from the time they spent away from it.
Right.
And it was funny playing with the Wii U, because it was basically, we all had the exact same amount of time to play it, except for my one friend who actually owned the Wii U.
Right.
And he never played it a ton, I think, without us. So we were basically always coming back and being about the same skill level, and the only difference would be is if somebody couldn't, like, make a session or whatever, right? That's like a few less hours of playtime.
Right.
So we were basically just coming back to the same place where everybody was exactly as good as they were before. And so there wasn't a lot of change in the rankings. And one thing that I was always kind of happy with is I was pretty good, just like intuitively at Smash. Like I picked it up fast.
Right.
So I always felt like I was just that little bit ahead because nobody else could practice up and get that extra time. I was always just that little bit ahead of most people. So I would win, you know, when it was like 4 of us playing, I would win like 75% of the games or whatever, which is great. And then the problem is the Switch came out and Ultimate, the new game, came out, and all the same people that I was playing with bought the online subscription so that they could play with people online, and there was motivation to play even when we weren't around each other, and then everybody could practice in their own homes. And then I started going to university in a STEM program while other people were going to varying levels of day-to-day busyness in their university programs, and now I'm the worst at Smash by far. Now I get my butt handed to me pretty consistently.
It is funny how, again, the games change so much depending on how you play them and the cost involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I miss those days of stand-up machines, though, when you could just pop a quarter in.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to make such a big investment up front. And no, like, it's like you're saying, paying for the online for Nintendo.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem worth it because you won't get the value out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you could pay a quarter a game, you probably would, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how those monthly subscription passes are theoretically kind of working, right? Where you pay a certain amount of money, and then you just have access to almost like your own mini sort of like arcade worth of stuff where there's a cost to entry, but then you're paying and you're not committing to one game and you're not committing to owning it forever. Right? You're not committing to the license for it. You're just committing to sort of being able to play it while you got time to play.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks for that digression.
Yeah, just good times. So we've got our next 2 questions are sort of linked. So our first one comes from Ha, and they just say, "How have you guys been?" And then we have a comment from Jim Halpert, and they say, "I also want to know how you guys have been. Also, I really wish the game would go back to how it used to be. Almost any good packs are now only able to be bought with money, and that's too bad. I think it would benefit everyone to get rid of that." So there's 2 parts of it. The first one is how have we been? I'll say broadly speaking, pretty good.
I think we've been doing better than a lot of people.
Yeah. I'll say what's going on with me right now, which is I'm about to be in finals season. And so in the past, like, I don't know, week and a bit, past little bit, I have typed up like I think at least 60 pages of notes for the purposes of open book finals that I have. So it's been a little bit grueling. I've been doing a lot of readings, a lot of lectures, and I am just really in sort of mentally engaged study mode for most of the day. So that maybe doesn't sound so good, but the sort of second half of that, which is the good part, is that I think I'm mostly on top of it. And I anticipate myself doing well, given the challenge in the course up until this point.
Right, good.
So that's how I'm doing. I just submitted like a 10-page paper yesterday and stuff. So a lot of work right now. Very busy time. About to open up a little bit for me. And the thing that I'm looking forward to right now is being on break very soon. And I think I'm going to be cracking into the new Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, the Keanu Reeves thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cyberpunk's been interesting.
There's been mixed reviews.
Oh, yeah? I haven't seen
Not
it.
generally. So it's not out yet, but the embargo is off for reviewers of the game.
Okay.
And so it's got like a 90-something on Metacritic, which is very good. But publications that I have, when I've read actual specific reviews about it from like people that like publications that I tend to like.
Right.
Like Polygon, especially the one, which is saying, it's pretty good. And then here are all the reasons that it's maybe not so great. And there's a couple things that they've done which I don't love. It's apparently pretty bad for epilepsy. There's a lot of strobe stuff. And there is one thing, and there's no setting to turn off. There's a bunch of glitch effects and strobe stuff, so like flickering red and blue lights for that sort of cyberpunk aesthetic that are really bad for anybody with like photosensitivity or epilepsy.
Right.
And apparently there's one piece of technology in the game that mimics, that looks like, and that somebody who has epilepsy believes is based off of a medical tool that is actually used to induce an epileptic seizure.
Oh, I hear that they do that intentionally when they want to test somebody to confirm whether they got it or not.
Yeah, so, I read a quick sort of reviewer's guide of somebody who played through it, and said, I think this is literally modeled based off of the technology that induces seizures in people, and there's no way to turn it off. Which means that if you are sensitive to epilepsy, they're like, I played through the whole game, I had one grand mal seizure while playing through it in a bunch of like really sort of close moments. I had to have my partner play through some sections for me. And there's no accessibility settings for that, which is not great.
No.
And kind of disappointing for a game with as huge a budget and supposed to have sort of wide mainstream appeal.
Right. And
is made by a publisher who is by and large pretty well respected and has a pretty good reputation. It would be nice to see more effort put into their accessibility features.
And it sounds like it wouldn't even take that much effort.
Yeah. And it's been brought to their attention now, and they're saying that they're putting a more strict seizure warning on it, and that they're working with their programmers to see if it was possible. But I think it's disappointing to see that new games today don't have, especially when they have such a big budget and they are made by a big company, right? They have more than the money and enough people working on it that you'd imagine that they would have the foresight to try to make the games accessible.
It doesn't take much. It's like any kind of media, right? You have an accessibility reader. You could have accessibility beta testers.
Yeah. I am really interested in accessibility in video games, and I think it's something that we should strive for. And it's just unfortunate the ways that we fall short sometimes. I forget what game it was. I think Doom, the original 2016 Doom, and some other games have done the same thing. Initially had a colorblind mode that instead of making it more easier to view for colorblind people, the colorblind mode that you turned on would just basically simulate that type of colorblindness on your screen. So if you turned on like the Deuteranopia mode or whatever, it would literally just restrict the color palette it would just put a Deuteranopia filter over the game. So it wasn't actually an accessibility mode, it was just a way to...
It was an equalizer. It was an inaccessibility mode. It was equalizer.
Yeah, for anybody who didn't have any color vision deficits, you could turn it on and simulate what it would be like, which is kind of... It would be funny if it weren't sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how you've been doing.
That's how I've been doing.
All right, so how I've been doing. I guess I feel like I've said this before, that we've been doing overall pretty well. We know there's lots of people that are doing worse. I think the danger is that how well or how poorly you're doing internally, like in your head, is a little bit influenced by what's going on outside, and it's a lot influenced by factors outside your control. So it's been, I've still got my job. Still, we've mostly avoided the tragedy that's COVID-19. There's the good news is, like I was saying earlier, that the availability of vaccines is getting closer. So my work's been pretty good. I've been actually exploring some other. I don't want to dox myself, so I've been exploring some other stuff that, like doing stuff at work that's not really my job,
but that you find
I find very satisfying.
Yeah,
and I'm doing something that it's not really art in the traditional sense of the word, but I feel like I'm creating something that's new.
It's a creative outlet to a meaningful extent to you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's a real a value and appreciation of it from people who are using these things I'm creating, which is cool. So
great. Yeah. I think another thing that's worth noting here, I don't know if you said that before, maybe not entirely surprising for somebody who, for people who have a gaming YouTube channel, but our lifestyles were not super significantly incompatible with going out less. Right? Yeah. It's been hard on everybody, but I know there are some people who really need that sort of social interaction in a different way than we do.
Even basic stuff, I look at it and think, I work out. I haven't been to a gym in years. I haven't needed a gym for even longer. So I've got my gym set up.
Yeah.
Not only did I not have to worry about going to outside the gym, I didn't even have to worry about spending like through the nose kind of prices for gym equipment because it was all there. In fact, I actually sold a bunch, not at, exorbitant prices, but enough so that I didn't feel like somebody was just going to buy it. Well, somebody might bought it just to resell it, but then I priced it low enough to sell fast and high enough that I didn't think I was going to get ripped off and somebody was just going to buy it and sell it to somebody else and make the profit themselves. Right?
Yeah, and as somebody who went off to university and kept in touch with a bunch of high school friends who went to a bunch of different places, I was used to catching up with people by playing games online, like Jackbox and stuff like that, and having sort of like a board and like game playing friend group.
Yeah.
That was not a super hard transition for me.
So I wanted to ask you, is Jackbox ever in the Humble Bundle or no?
Yes, I believe it is.
Next time it is, let me know, because I want to get some, because you're not always going to be hanging around with us. Yeah. And I figure that I've actually really enjoyed it at times we've played it. I wouldn't mind having it for some of our friend gatherings.
Yeah. It's a great series of games.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could also just show you how to set it up another time, but we can talk about that off camera.
Yeah, all right.
Or off mic, I guess. We're not showing our faces. But yeah, so that's how we've been doing. Pretty good. Cool. Thanks for asking. And this is a great opportunity. If anybody wants to let us know how you've been doing, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
We can read out how people have been doing if anybody's got some...
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah.
Some stories or anything that they want to share next episode. Good to check in with folks. So this is our check-in. How you doing? Let us know. And we actually will engage. We're not just saying that so that more people comment. We'd like to meaningfully engage with that a little bit if you would like to share with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. Our next question comes from Eldon Rose. And we won't spend too much time on this because we get this question every once in a while. But people keep asking. And clearly not everybody knows. This says, hey, I've only been listening a few months, but I was wondering what the origin of the catchphrase Kimota was at the end of your videos.
Yeah, at some point it feels like we're sort of reliving, like it's Groundhog Day. But
what's funny is that we clearly don't pronounce it with a clear enough enunciation. We've had this conversation before too, because whenever anybody who isn't specifically aware of it talks about it, they say Kimota and they use a D because that sounds like what we're saying. But what we're trying to say is Kimota with a T. And it's sort of it's already a slight bastardization. Kimota is a atomic backwards.
Yeah, so let's let people discover it. Miracle Man, great comic book. Alan Moore, I think he's one of the best writers ever in doing comic book work.
Yeah.
He's done stuff that's great as stories, but also stuff that's redefined the medium in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Apparently he's a wizard too, like a real life wizard. So all very cool. If you haven't read Miracle Man, you need to, and the explanation is in there.
Yeah. And so the problem is that Kimota with a T is still not exactly atomic backwards because it starts with a K instead of a C. And the second problem is that when we don't enunciate the Kimota properly, then people end up thinking it's Kimota, which is Adomac backwards, which is still nothing. So it's a few sort of steps away from anything that you'd be able to actually figure out. So we make it hard for people. But there we go. Our next question comes from Leorio Paradonite, who is now a series of kanji that look like Paradonite Leorio.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that the first time when I was looking at it. When you said it, I looked a little closer and realized that's true.
Yeah, so we've got an increasingly esoteric series of characters. Almost like they're trying to make it harder for us, specifically.
Yeah.
But anyways, they say... Are you trying to put it in
Translate
now?
Yeah.
I don't think it means anything. I think it's probably just for the aesthetic of it.
I just wonder if there's actually a meaning that was unintended.
No.
Oh, so there is nothing. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. And they say, Mom reveal. Thanks for the feedback. Best regards. And then, Leorio Paradonite, just in case we need to pronounce it again this time, which we do. And then, lol, my name be spelled like Can-L right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I like it. What, did we even talk? Is there a reason? I can't even remember now about the mom reveal.
You put it in. I don't know.
Okay. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening, but yeah, that's interesting.
Probably not a mom reveal. Yeah.
Are we out of time?
We are almost out of time. It's unfortunate. I think, honestly, at some point in this channel or our YouTube careers, there will be videos with my face in it. Just because every once in a while I have ideas for stuff. And I think they would work much better with a different format. And a different format than I could do without showing my face.
Right.
So, like, not like the reaction video in the way that one traditionally thinks about it, but like a sort of variety slice of life video where you talk about something in the style of, like, Scott Kramer or Drew Gooden or, I think, Cody Ko. Danny Gonzalez type videos. Every once in a while I have an idea for those that I think would be really cool. Something interesting. Like, I had an interesting experience with Tommy Wiseau's merch company. Trying to purchase something.
The Room?
Yeah, Tommy Wiseau of The Room. And I was like, oh, this would be kind of a fun video, but I don't know how to make it, and I don't have time to make it, and I think I might have to show my face to make it in the way that I'm imagining it being made.
Right.
And so, at some point, I think that might have to be the type of content that I make, just because I think it would be fun.
I'm looking forward to that.
If it ever happens.
I'll tell you what, when I at the point where I retire, and I'm still interested in making videos, I think I might do that too.
Yeah?
I'd be happy to... Listen, when there's no consequence anymore, I think I wouldn't care anymore, and it'd be a little bit fun to, extend a little bit and see what we could do differently.
And there we go. We're out of time. We were worried before we started filming.
I thought there would be too much footage.
we talk forever. Anyways, to finish up, we've got some people that we'd like to say some things to. So we've got, first off, a quick shout out to Eliza, Strawberry Passion Awareness Caton. That's the name of a flavor of Fruitopia for some reason. She finds it very funny. This shout out has been brought to you by a very weird naming convention at Fruitopia, which is a Coca-Cola subsidiary. Some food for thought. And
literally.
Yeah. And last but not least, we'd like to thank all of the wonderful people who support us on Patreon.
That's a big thank you to Consul Peasant and Edwoon at the top tier, Last Word, Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier, Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the credited level, and Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E. at the gratitude level.
There you go. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Kimota.